When the young man stood before his church that Sunday morning, no one expected what came out of his mouth. His hands trembled as he whispered, "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was so deep it could crush a heart. People thought it was a joke. Some laughed nervously, others just stared. But he wasn't joking. His name was Micah Langford, a 27-year-old choir member from a small town in Missouri, and his story would soon shake not just his church, but the entire medical community. Micah wasn't the kind of man who drew attention. He worked as a nurse's assistant at a local clinic, volunteered at his church every weekend, and lived a quiet, disciplined life. Everything about him was ordinary, until his body started betraying him. It began with exhaustion. He thought it was just overwork from his night shifts. Then came nausea, morning sickness, and sudden sensitivity to smells. Even coffee made him sick, and that, to him, was the strangest thing of all. A few weeks later, he noticed his abdomen slightly swelling. He joked about gaining weight, but something inside him whispered that it wasn't that simple. By the end of the month, Micah could no longer ignore it. His lower abdomen felt tight, his appetite shifted strangely, and his mood swings became unpredictable. At work, his coworkers teased him, saying he was acting pregnant. He laughed it off, but one evening after his shift, he went home, looked in the mirror, and froze. His stomach had clearly rounded, subtle, but undeniable. He booked a doctor's appointment the next morning. The physician, Dr. Alana Pierce, ran a series of tests, expecting to find a hormonal imbalance or a tumor. But what she found made her stare at the screen in disbelief. "Micah," she said slowly, "I need you to sit down." She turned the monitor toward him. The ultrasound showed something she couldn't logically explain. A small sac, developing tissue, inside what appeared to be an abdominal cavity with a functioning blood supply. At first, Dr. Pierce refused to believe her own eyes. She called in two specialists, both of whom repeated the scan and reached the same result. But how could a biological male develop a gestational sac? It was medically impossible, or at least, it should have been. They sent Micah to the University Hospital in St. Louis for deeper evaluation. There, a team of endocrinologists and geneticists ran advanced imaging, blood work, and hormonal tests. The results stunned everyone. His hormone levels resembled those of an early pregnancy. His blood contained hCG, the hormone only pregnant individuals produce. The fetal tissue was alive and developing. The head doctor, Dr. Rowan McIntyre, called an emergency meeting. "This case defies everything we know," he said. "Either this is a medical anomaly of history, or something far more complex." Micah sat quietly, his mind spinning. He didn't understand how or why, but deep inside, he felt a strange connection to what was happening in his body. A mix of fear, confusion, and, strangely, protection. Weeks went by. Micah withdrew from his friends and stopped going to church. He couldn't bear the questions, the gossip. He told only one person, his close friend and former colleague, Dr. Nathan Cole, a biomedical researcher who had once worked on reproductive tissue engineering. When Nathan heard Micah's symptoms and saw the scans, he went silent. Then, almost whispering, he said, "Micah, do you remember that research trial 2 years ago? The one on artificial womb transplantation?" Micah nodded. Back then, he had volunteered as a lab assistant in a clinical trial that aimed to explore uterine tissue grafts in men as a way to study long-term immunoresponse. It was purely experimental and non-functional, or so he thought. Nathan explained that one of the test grafts might have fused unexpectedly with Micah's internal lining, creating a functional microenvironment capable of sustaining a fertilized egg. But how had it been fertilized? That question haunted everyone. Under the microscope, researchers discovered something even stranger. Micah's body showed traces of donor stem cells that had been part of that same medical trial. The theory was shocking. Those cells had adapted, forming rudimentary reproductive tissue. Somehow, through either a lab mishandling or accidental transfer during the research phase, a single fertilized ovum had developed inside his grafted tissue. It was a 1 in a billion occurrence, medically possible only under highly specific and accidental conditions. Nathan admitted, "Micah, this wasn't supposed to happen, but it did, and you're carrying it." Micah's eyes filled with tears. "So you're saying, this life wasn't planned by me? It's science gone wrong." Nathan shook his head. "Maybe not wrong. Maybe nature found a way we didn't expect." By the time Micah reached his second trimester, the changes were undeniable. He wore loose clothing, avoided social gatherings, and lied about having a stomach condition. But his church noticed his absence. The community he once loved began whispering. One Sunday morning, guilt and exhaustion pushed him to return. He sat through the sermon, trembling. As the pastor spoke about truth and forgiveness, something broke inside him. He stood up. The room turned silent. "I need to say something," he said, voice cracking. "I haven't been sick. I'm pregnant." A gasp ran through the crowd. Some shouted blasphemy. Others laughed in disbelief. His best friend, Clara, fainted. Micah didn't explain further. He simply said, "It's not what you think. It's something I can't explain, but it's real. I've seen it. The doctors have seen it." Within hours, his story spread through town. Social media lit up with headlines. "Man claims to be pregnant. Church in shock." News outlets surrounded the hospital. Religious groups debated whether it was a miracle or madness. Scientists wanted to study the case under tight ethics supervision. Micah, meanwhile, struggled between two worlds: the medical reality that said this was a once-in-human-history biological event, and the spiritual world that saw him as a symbol of divine mystery or heresy. He spent nights talking to the life growing inside him, unsure whether to feel joy or terror. At 6 months, things turned critical. The grafted womb tissue began to weaken. Doctors warned him that carrying further could rupture internal organs. Micah faced an impossible choice: terminate the pregnancy or risk his own life. "I can't," he whispered. "If it's alive, I can't end it." But one night, he collapsed at home with severe pain and internal bleeding. Emergency surgery followed. When Micah woke up days later, Nathan sat beside him. "You're okay," he said softly. "We had to operate. You lost a lot of blood, but we saved you." Micah's eyes filled with tears. "And the baby?" Nathan hesitated. "It was still early. It didn't make it. But what you carried changed medicine forever." The medical team preserved the tissue, confirming that Micah's case was not a hoax. It became a published study under the title "Spontaneous Extrauterine Gestation Following Uterine Tissue Integration in a Male Subject." The church eventually forgave him. Some saw it as divine mystery. Others simply couldn't comprehend it. But Micah's courage inspired doctors worldwide to rethink the boundaries of biology. Months later, Micah returned to the same church. He didn't speak about science or miracles. He simply said, "Sometimes what happens to us isn't meant to be understood. It's meant to remind us how little we know about life itself." People listened in silence. This time, no one laughed. Micah's story wasn't about fame or shock. It was about how fragile and unpredictable life can be. It reminded us that sometimes the most unbelievable things happen to the most ordinary people. No matter how advanced science becomes, some mysteries remain beyond explanation. And maybe that's what makes life both terrifying and beautiful. So now let me ask you this. If something completely impossible happened to you, something no one would ever believe, would you have the courage to tell the world or keep it hidden forever? Let me know in the comment box below and subscribe for more interesting science fiction stories.